I think it's time that we address the elephant in the room. What's a habit? When I decided to coach introverts working from home, specifically around healthy habits, I thought I had a good idea of what a habit is. But as I started to talk about this, I realized that there are many different ways that people think about habits, and that I really didn't understand what habits are as well as I thought I did. After working with one-to-one clients as a productivity coach for a few years, it started to dawn on me that if we paid attention to a few key habits for my clients, they ended up achieving what they wanted more easily. It brought them much more joy and peace of mind. That's when I knew habits is what I wanted to focus on. But as I started to explore, there were a lot of questions. For example, is a habit really automatic? Are some people just not disciplined enough to form habits? Why do we get stuck in bad habits? Not to mention, how long does it take to form a habit? And what's the best way to learn a new habit? I'm going to make a series to explore all these questions in different chapters of this podcast. I'll create a playlist on YouTube with all the habit-related chapters as I go. So check that out if you want to know more about sustainable healthy habits for introverts who work from home. Today, we're going to start at the beginning. What is a habit? We're going to talk about what a habit is, if it's really automatic, and how habits can help you to conserve energy. And towards the end, we're going to talk about why we get stuck in bad habits, and that I have a little bit of a different view when it comes to good and bad habits. Hi, I'm Mariela. I help introverts who work from home to create healthy habits so that they have more energy and improved focus without habits that feel forced or only last 2 weeks. On this podcast, I share the things that I'm researching and what I'm learning on my mission to understand what introverts really need to feel energized and to do the things that are important to them. I'll share with you some of the science behind these ideas and practical tips that might inspire you to live a happier, healthier life. Is a habit really automatic? One of the questions that came up a lot is whether or not a habit really is automatic. The most common definition of a habit is an automated behavior that we repeat. Usually automatic in this context means that you don't really think about it. It's subconscious and it happens without you paying much attention to it. A lot of the time this is interpreted as in that it's beyond your control or that it will happen no matter what you do. Well, that is not true. All habits are behaviors. With habits, the behavior is often something new that you're trying to learn. At first, that's a conscious choice and it takes effort. Over time, the habit becomes consolidated. That's when it becomes subconscious and more effortless. Brushing your teeth is always a good example for this. As an adult, you probably don't have to put much effort or thought into brushing your teeth. Once you pick up the toothbrush, you'll just brush without thinking about it much. But when you were just learning to brush your teeth, it probably took some effort to learn how to do it. We're teaching our son right now, and it's taking some effort from all of those involved. But so a habit isn't automatic in the sense that there's nothing that you can do about it or that it will happen no matter what you do. A habit is a behavior that you once learned and then you repeated it, and that led to it now being something that you do without thinking about it. I recently heard this definition of a habit that was used by Taro Iwamoto. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. He defined learning a habit as changing the patterns between your brain and your body. I really like this definition. In the brain, this is exactly what happens when you learn a habit. You are changing the pattern, the very structure of the brain. We won't go into detail on that today, but let me know if you want me to explore that in a future chapter. The point is that habits are patterns of behavior that can be changed. Ultimately, you are the only one who can choose your behavior. Sometimes we're not aware of it, but it's by our behavior that we're choosing the habits and the patterns that we live by. Why are habits important for energy and focus, especially for introverts? Another question that comes up a lot is, why should I even think about my habits? Why should I even be concerned about them? So this goes back to the brain-body relationship. The reason why we form habits at all is so that our brain can conserve energy. Your brain is in charge of steering both subconscious and conscious processes in your body. Conscious processes are things that we consciously think about. Anything that you're doing that you are on some level thinking about doing. Think of like me now consciously moving my hands, thinking about what to cook for dinner, writing an article, listening and speaking with your partner. Those are things that we are consciously thinking about while we're doing them. But at the same time that you're doing those things, your brain is also steering all the subconscious processes. Those are things that are happening in your body, but that you're not thinking about in order for them to happen. While I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm breathing. My heart keeps beating. I had a snack earlier and that food is being digested. Imagine if we had to consciously think of doing all these things, we'd have little time to do anything else. All these conscious, but also the subconscious processes take up a lot of energy. Here are some numbers to give you some perspective on this. The brain weighs about 2% of your total body weight, but it consumes 20% of your body's energy. That's a disproportionate amount of energy that the brain needs to have all this processing power. Up to 90% of the energy that the brain uses is spent running the subconscious processes in your body. So even when you're resting, the brain spends up to 90% of its energy just to keep you alive, basically. This is probably where the saying, you only use 10% of your brain capacity came from. But this number actually has nothing to do with capacity, but it's about metabolic energy consumption. The capacity of your brain is unlimited because the brain is plastic and can change depending on what is asked of it. So if your brain is spending 90% of its energy just to run your body, you can imagine that anything your brain can do to conserve energy is a win. And that's where habits come in. Habitual actions take up less energy than conscious actions. The same is true for thought. Habitual thought patterns take up less energy than conscious thoughts. So by doing things on autopilot, your brain frees up energy for other things. For example, complex problem solving and social interactions with other people. What does this mean for introverts? You've probably heard that introverts lose energy when interacting with others, while extroverts gain energy. There's more to this because it can depend on who you're interacting with, if it's draining or energizing for you. And even if you're working by yourself, certain activities can also be draining. But generally speaking, most introverts have less energy after a full day, while most extroverts have more energy. And it's an easy way to recognize if you're more introverted or more extroverted. You can think of this as a battery. We each start the day with a certain amount of energy in our battery. Even if you've had a good night's sleep and you start off the day with a fully charged battery, most introverts' batteries will get emptier and emptier as the day goes on. At the end of the day, their batteries are completely empty, and they usually need quiet activities or to be by themselves to recharge their battery. An extrovert's battery gets charged while they're with other people. So even if they start with an empty battery at the beginning of the day, they can end up with a full battery after having been out and around people all day. So this is why I think that having the right habits in place can be so powerful, especially for introverts, because it's an amazing way to conserve energy in places that you didn't even think about. And that just makes it a little bit easier to make space for the things that are important to you and that you want to consciously put effort into. Why do we get stuck in a bad habit? Now let's talk about good and bad habits. If I asked you to share a bad habit that you want to stop, I'm pretty sure that you can come up with one or two examples. Something that I'm working on right now is to stop sitting on the couch with my laptop. Because I work from home, I spread out sometimes and I can end up on the couch. It's terrible for my back. So working on the couch is something that you could consider a bad habit for me. It can be really frustrating when you're trying to get rid of a bad habit, but you just can't seem to shake it. Now you know that habits help your brain to conserve energy. Just like learning a good habit, like brushing your teeth, takes energy in the beginning, unlearning a bad habit, like working on the couch, also takes energy. Because in both cases, you're rewiring the patterns between the brain and the body. Breaking a bad habit is something that the brain is willing to do when it is important enough to do it. So bad habits that are really, really easy to do are notoriously difficult to change because it's simply not important enough, or it takes more effort to unlearn the habit than to keep doing it. The brain would rather just keep doing the same thing again because that is more energy efficient. So we're naturally resistant to change in this way, even if we know that making the change would be good for us long term. But there are some things that you can do. There's actually quite a bit of research about what it takes to build a habit. In another chapter, we'll talk more about the steps of habit building and how to learn a good habit or break a bad one. But first, I want to encourage you to make a mental shift. Stop talking about your habits as being good versus bad. It's really normal to get frustrated or to feel guilty around bad habits. Maybe the habit is not aligned with your goals, or maybe you have been shamed for this habit by other people around you in the past. I used to feel guilty all the time about bad habits that I had. And most of my clients have a similar guilt when it comes to not living up to their goals or falling back into old patterns. The reason why we perceive a habit as bad is because we feel guilty. We started to link a moral value to the very idea of habits, but that moral value really isn't there. Frankly, a lot of the times, the guilt is worse than the habit. I want to let go of that notion. From your brain's perspective, any habit is good because it saves energy. But there's no inherent judgment linked to a particular habit. So don't think of habits as being good or bad. From what we talked about earlier, I hope that you've come to understand that habits are just small behaviors. The key is in your ability to choose. You can choose habits that will actually support you in doing the things you want to do. We all want to live healthy and meaningful lives. But what that looks like for you and the habits that will support that are different for every person. I recently heard this quote from William James. The great thing in all education is to make our nervous system our ally instead of our enemy. This quote beautifully describes the way I like to approach learning habits. When you're learning a habit, you're changing the patterns between the brain and the body. You're changing your nervous system. The problems come when you try to fight your nervous system. When you force yourself to stick to a habit that was successful for someone else, but that just isn't working for you. Or when you don't understand what your personal needs are and you try habit after habit that make you feel more tired and more chaotic. Most people end up talking themselves out of doing what they really want and what they know is good for them. Or they feel lazy and undisciplined because they don't have the energy. No matter the type of habit that you're trying to learn, no matter your age, your personality, or your particular nervous system, why don't we start making your nervous system your ally and start tailoring your habits so that they fit your personal energy needs and they support you to do the things that you want to do in life. If you have questions about habits, let me know. I have a couple of books about habits on my reading list. Atomic Habits is one. I've read it before, but it's been a while. So I'm planning to reread that one and to do a book review on it. But I'm curious to know which book or question about habits would you like to explore? Leave your recommendation in the comments or click on the suggest a topic link in the description. I've created a special form to make it easier for you to suggest a topic and to do that anonymously if you prefer. So I'll leave that in the description for you. Thank you for hanging out with me today and let's talk soon. Bye.